Welcome to Postgame Live on Channel BSR. I am Jake English, joined by Scott Magnus. Scott and I were just treated to listening and watching the Orioles drop a game in extras, 8-7. Scott, how you feeling?
It's 11:30 at night, and we just watched an absolutely miserable, horrible, no good experience.
The worst part was they were flying through the game. They were just flying through the game, and if it had ended in regulation, it would have been a pretty quick game. And instead, we had to sit through and wait for this. So, as is our custom here, we're going to take a quick run through the box score and see, what we liked, what we hated. I think the real story is we're finally getting the offense we were promised, but the pitching just isn't holding up their end of the bargain. Orioles relievers were up and down throughout the evening, but again, with the offense, just about everybody contributed. Chris Davis was the only starter without a hit, and he did end up walking. Scott, before we get any further, why don't we start by talking about your highlights and lowlights for the game?
Sure. So my highlight for the game is going to go to. I'm going to go with Ryan Flaherty's F-bomb. I think that was a big moment in the game that really helped distinguish the game, and going up 5-3 over the Indians after being down 3-0. I think that was a big moment in the game. So that's my highlight for the game.
Yeah, that was significant at one point. Um, my highlight for the game is actually somewhat connected, and that's the fact that the Orioles scored 5 runs with 2 outs. And scoring runs with 2 outs is always a good thing. It's also something that they've struggled with at times, so it was really good to see them put together runs in a hurry like that. What about your low light for the evening?
Jake, my low light for the evening has to be David Lowe DPing back to the pitcher with the bases loaded with no outs, and the Orioles coming out of that inning with no runs.
Yeah, it's not as if that would come back to haunt them or anything.
No, of course not. If you look through the box score, the Orioles grounded into 4 double plays in this game, and that's just going to come back and kill you eventually, taking people off the bases and sending them back to the dugout. So I think that was a big portion of this game. That yes, we have big offensive contributions, but it should have been more. And again, we put ourselves into a lot of double plays.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but are we really going to beat them up for only scoring 7 runs?
Yes, because we needed to score 9 runs to win.
All right. My low light for the evening was Darren O'Day giving up a home run in the 8th, which ended up tying the game and allowed the game to extend into extra innings where the deciding runs would later be given up. So my low light, Darren O'Day giving up the home run. All right, let's start with the offense. Scott, what did you see from the offense tonight?
I thought actually the person that was most impressive in the offense tonight was actually Adam Jones. Really productive game in terms of a 3 for 6. Yes, I realized that he struck out there, or not struck out. He had that pop fly that went out to deep left field. But I thought Adam Jones did a really good job of buoying himself in that middle of the lineup. And we talked on our podcast, I think he's turning things around very quickly. It is a little concerning after the 3 home run instance with Chris Davis that Chris Davis has now come back and had an 0 for 5, and yes, I realized that he had 1 walk in there, but it's a little concerning from your number 4 hitter.
Absolutely. It's hard to beat him up because he just got through with an all-world performance where he hit 3 home runs, so I think that buys him some time before we say that he's really struggling. But yeah, the offense was, it was prolific tonight, and on one hand, on the other hand, it was really disappointing with the opportunities that they left on the table. A big storyline for this game early on especially was just that David Lowe is absolutely worthless at the plate. He brings nothing to the table offensively, and I really wonder how long he can continue to stay on the team if he's going to continue to do this.
Yeah, after today's performance, he has a 171 average. I know he made that great play in left field, but like you said, how long can that last? And I think we talked about it on the podcast with Francisco Peguero possibly coming up after rehab, or even a Nolan Reimold. You really wonder, is David Lowe's days numbered?
Well, I mean, Nelson Cruz, who's not a great defensive left fielder, brings more in total with his all hit no glove than Lowe does with his all glove no hit.
Maybe, but if you look at the WAR, they're pretty close.
Yeah, I'm not looking at the WAR, Scott. All right, let's talk about defense. What did you see defensively?
Well, both teams had some absolutely abhorrent defensive innings. Let's go to the inning where Ryan Flaherty bobbled two double play balls that could have got Chen out of the inning, and well, actually could have gotten him the win basically. But the Indians equally had some terrible defense as well in the what was it, the seventh inning? I think it was. And just an ugly performance overall for defense, in my opinion, from top to bottom. The only really great play that I think we saw was the David Lowe catch in left field.
Well, the Indians have something of an excuse for playing a long game prior to arriving and then having to travel. What's the Orioles' excuse?
They were coming from Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, the only real defensive highlight we had was Lowe's catch. A couple of the notes, actually, one of the things you noted for us in the game notes was Steve Clevenger passing a ball and allowing the third run of the ball game. And we did see a couple of nice plays from Manny Machado, but he has broken my heart enough for the evening that I'm not going to bother to praise him.
Well, I mean, again, those nice plays were great, but now that he has a possible groin strain, we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if that'll take him out of the lineup, and if so, how long.
Well, it's interesting if he's out of the lineup and Chris Davis goes on baby leave too. That lineup is going to be looking like the Sunday lineup for the next few days.
Yeah, that's brutal. Although, Steve Pearce does bring something to the lineup in Chris Davis's absence. He's obviously not Chris Davis, but I don't think there's as much of a drop off between Chris Davis and Steve Pearce as there is between Manny Machado and any of the backup infielders we could possibly use.
Right. The other thing that we should give consideration to is if Chris Davis does go on maternity leave, which sounds like it's going to happen this weekend, they basically can call someone up from Norfolk just for the quick turnaround time. So the question would be, who could the Orioles bring up just for the weekend series? Based off this game, maybe it's maybe some pitching depth, and you bring up a pitcher and you go with a short bench. Or maybe you bring up someone like, if Manny's actually hurt, maybe you bring up Jamal Weeks back up again, or
Steve Lombardozzi.
Steve Lombardozzi, exactly. It'll be interesting to see what kind of roster manipulation goes on after this game because, A, the bullpen has been taxed again, and now you've also got injuries to Manny, and you've got Davis leaving possibly this weekend.
Well, you talked about the bullpen. Let's move into the pitching. First, I want to start with the Indians. These extra innings really hurt the Indians worse than it hurts the Orioles because this is their second consecutive, I think it's their second consecutive 13-inning game in a row. And they had to use 6 pitchers. That really puts them behind the 8 ball for the rest of the series.
Yeah, but you kind of have to expect that they're going to make another move and bring somebody up. But you're right. I mean, it's definitely going to weigh more on the Indians than the Orioles. But, still, you went through 5 bullpen pitchers for us. So I understand what you're saying, Jake, but I think we need to slow your roll a little bit.
Well, we did end up going through a lot of relievers, but it really wasn't so much the starter's fault for once. Chen looked good early and deserved better than when he got defensively, but he went deep enough. For my taste, he just, the Orioles didn't have the luck in the can and got stuck in that extra inning game.
It was interesting too because if you look at Chen's pitch count, he pitched 90, I think it was 92 pitches, and he had 92 pitches and 68 were strikes, but he only had 1 strikeout on the entire night. I think that's kind of strange based off of his strike percentage. But the other thing was Palmer was mentioning on the Masson broadcast that he seemed like he was pitching too many strikes. You can see an elevated hit count, and I'd be interested to see a comparison in starts so far with Chen in terms of his strike percentage and then his BABIP for the game as well.
Sure. The other interesting thing about his kind of up and down night is that Chen got a first pitch strike in 21 of the 27 at bats, which is obviously a sign of success. But he did end up getting bit by the defense bug. He was tagged with 5 earned runs. I'd be curious to see if maybe the official scorer doesn't go back and look at some of those after the game and make an adjustment because Ryan Flaherty just was a shame in that inning. But yeah, so Chen's line looks terrible, but it really wasn't. 6 innings, 6 and 2/3 innings, scattering 8 hits, 5 earned runs, only struck out the one and gave up a home run. Also did not walk a batter, which is probably a huge reason that he stayed in the game as long as he did.
Chad was good, and he would have been a story of the game for me. But I really think getting later into the game, Preston Guillemette was really the story of the game. 2 1/3 innings pitched, and just absolute dominance. I thought he really attacked the plate really well. I was very impressed with what I saw from him tonight.
Yeah, and great to see him do it against the team that kind of gave up on him and traded him over. It's one of those great things about sports that it just crops up every once in a while and the planets align. But I liked what I saw from him tonight. I like what I've seen from him all season, to be honest with you. He hasn't been burned, and so I haven't had the opportunity to lash out emotionally at him. But he's got great movement on his breaking stuff and knows how to spot a fastball. So he could be a real weapon in the bullpen if he can continue to reach this level and if he can stick at the major league level.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's definitely displayed some impressive outing here too. And again, like we talked about on our podcast, he has some excellent minor league numbers. If he can translate that to the major leagues with his K to walk ratios, I think we've got an interesting pitcher in our hands going forward.
All right. Another interesting pitcher that we have on our hands is Troy Patton. Troy Patton had been solid most of the season, but in his last 2 appearances, he's given up 5 runs over the course of 1 2/3 innings. He was not effective this evening.
No, it really gets into the question with Troy Patton of he's your third lefty in the bullpen, and Buck has already come out and said that's actually much more of a detriment to us than it is a benefit. Troy Patton has been rumored to be out there, as a trade chip for a backup catcher.
Because we're collecting all of the backup catches we can.
I'm just saying that was one of the rumors. But I really raised the question of, how long are we going to go with Troy Patton if he continues to perform this way? My opinion is he's only had 2 starts now where, he's had a poor performance. I think you're going to have to stick with him a little bit longer. But, he's already, soured the relationship with Baltimore with this 25-game suspension, and now all of a sudden he's not pitching as well as he should. It'll be interesting to see if the Orioles make a move just for a bag of balls or even just try to DFA him and try to sneak him through waivers.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting to see what happens with him. They've got to do something because that bullpen has got to come together. And there are definitely decisions that'll have to be made at some point. Like you said, if Guillemette can stick, Tommy Hunter when he comes back from the DL, eventually we'll need a spot. And we've already got 2 lefties that are doing okay without Troy Patton. So again, don't want to overreact. It's been just 2 bad games, but 2 bad games in a row. And boy, this one hurts. The Orioles really managed to snatch defeat out of the clutches of victory tonight.
Yeah, just really, really frustrating game. Jake, the other thing I wanted to go over really quickly was, Zach Britton coming in and also pitching 2 innings. Yes, Zach Britton is the quote-unquote starter by fans' comparison, but still, he's pitching those 2 innings of work a lot of games. I still come back to if they are actually making Britton into a 2-inning reliever going forward, and maybe he comes in the 8th and 9th to just save it out as opposed to just working 9th innings.
Yeah, I'm not really sure I'm ready to say that Zach Britton is the closer for this team, but I do think that having him capable of going more than 1 inning, makes him more versatile for Buck Showalter, gives Buck Showalter more buttons to press out there, But the most important thing about that is that he's only able to do it if he's doing well with his splits, putting away left-handers and right-handers. And so far, we've seen that he's been okay with that.
All right, Jake. So what's your bottom line takeaway for this game?
We've got to start winning some of these games when the offense explodes. We have got to start winning these games. After the offense was anemic through so much of the last couple of weeks, we've had an absolute explosion of runs, and we haven't done very well in those games. The pitching staff is just not holding up their end of the bargain, and we can't continue with this. I've had to eat crow for the last couple of weeks because I was saying before the season started, oh, the offense is going to carry this team. The offense is going to carry this team. And for a while, it was the pitching staff. And now we're back just to the other way around. So, again, these games hurt so much because half the club is doing exactly what we thought they would.
Yeah, I understand that. My impression of the game really is this is a game that really reminded me a lot of 2012, where the game was never really put away, and we kept relying on the bullpen to keep getting us through situation after situation after situation. But yes, the offense was able to put up runs up on the board, but we were never able to fully put them away with a 3 or 4 run cushion. Let's go back to
this game reminded me a lot of 2012, but with the Indians playing the role of the 2012 Orioles. That was the problem.
Right, but let's go back to the bottom of the seventh. Nick Markakis strikes out swinging. Manny Machado gets on first base after a fielding error. Jones gets on base after a fielding error. And then Chris Davis is intentionally walked. So you have bases loaded with one out, and Nelson Cruz hits a sac fly and scores a run. Great. We got a run in. It's small ball. But that's a situation when you've got Nelson Cruz up there that you're really looking to get 1 or 2 runs in, and especially Steve Clemenger coming up right afterwards and grounding out. When you've got bases loaded with 1 out, yes, you have to get at least 1 run in. But, missed opportunity there to get more runs. Similar in like when David Lowe was at the plate, and again, no outs, bases loaded, and you can't get any runs in. That stuff comes back and bites you in the end. So I come back to this is missed opportunity. The Orioles need to capitalize and have big innings just like they did when they had that 5-run inning in the second.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to beat up Nelson Cruz too much, especially with the way he's been carrying the team the last couple of weeks. But you're right; it would have been nice to have seen that inning extend into something more meaningful. The Orioles just haven't been able to provide separation between them and the opposing team. All right, well, that's probably about enough for this depressing loss. Like we said, this one hurts. Tomorrow is Bud Norris versus T.J. House, who was originally TBA, I think. Bud Norris has been pitching well as of late, even if he hasn't been getting the wins. What do you look for from him tomorrow?
I look for him to come inside and brush some people back.
You're just baiting me at this point, aren't you?
I am.
All right, well, I'm looking for Bud Norris to go deep into the games. The bullpen is going to be taxed. They'll probably bring up another arm tonight. It'll be interesting to see what the roster move is. But he'll need to provide.
TJ McFarland is supposed to be starting tomorrow night for Norfolk. I would expect that TJ. I don't think TJ McFarland will be starting for Norfolk. I think we'll see TJ McFarland up here tomorrow in order to fill a spot in the bullpen.
Sure. So, I really hope that Bud Norris is able to eat up some innings. The other thing that I'd like to see for tomorrow is whether or not Manny Machado will be on the field. Apparently, according to Twitter, which, as you know, is a very reliable source, Showalter said that Machado would have stayed in if he would have let him, but they were trying to be cautious and hopefully being smart about it. So it'll be interesting to see how long this will affect Manny Machado moving forward.
Yeah, the report from Dan Connolly on the Twitterverse is Manny said groin is stiff, but he said nothing too crazy. So it's good to hear that Manny's groin isn't so crazy.
All right. Do you have anything else of note to say before we sign off?
I do have one more thing of note. Speaking about tomorrow night's game, I would highly recommend everyone just to go over to Twitter, follow Baltimoreans, or go to Baltimoreans' website, and maybe just keep an eye on it, or put your ears to it tomorrow during the game, and we'll see what happens.
Should be very entertaining. I will be glued to my computer. If you don't know what we're talking about, please go to Be Morons. Also, you can find it at Baltimore Sports Report. Listen to their announcement on episode 95, which is very exciting, and go and spend some time with those guys tomorrow night. All
This
right.
video is a copyright broadcast of the Baltimore Sports Report. Hashtag all rights reserved.
And with that, we're going to sign off. Baltimore and beyond, I will bid you a fond adieu, adieu.
Good night, Baltimore.